Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. I hope your Passover was amazing. And now that we're actually in this time of Sefirah, counting up till Shavuot, getting ready for Matan Torah, figured it might be a great time to get back to the basics. The truth is that in preparing these classes, I've learned so much over the last few weeks, and I realize that I'm walking into a subject that I know very little about. There's so much here that needs to be unpacked. I'm overwhelmed by it. I don't even know how to present it to you in a way that's meaningful. I'm still stuck on Aleph. I'm kind of working through like a process in my head and how I'm gonna teach this to you. I'm thinking of either like having like the screen come down and like there's so much of it is visual because we're talking about letters. And letters are not just letters, they're also numbers, and there's vibration, there's so much to unpack. Anyway, all right, so I'm going to do basic introduction today, talk a little about the Hebrew letters themselves, and kind of give you an understanding of how our sages think about them. And then, God willing, in the weeks to come, we're going to go through each one of the letters and try to find their meaning and their essence and the story that each one tells. What's that?
We want you to find the original Aleph.
Oh yeah, we'll try. We'll try to do what we can to uncover all those mysteries together. I was actually working through like if there are anyone who's doing any real research on resonance and vibration and Hebrew letters, and there's no one really doing anything like real with it. And there's like a whole field that people are talking about now. The idea of vibrations and movement and resonance and sounds and so on and so forth, but we'll hopefully in time, as the technology gets cheaper, I think, to kind of like do these kind of real scientific explorations, we'll find more and more and more. Right now we can only do whatever Misorah we have how to understand this, whatever tradition we have that helps us get a deeper understanding is what we're going to be relying on for now. I wanted to go into the science of it, but I don't feel like it's too much pseudoscience for me to use it as a real science. But there's enough within the Kabbalistic texts, enough within our tradition to walk away with some real depth and meaning. Okay, Gemara in Brachot says that Bezalel, who was the builder of the tabernacle in the wilderness, knew how to combine the letters with which heaven and earth were created. It is written regarding Bezalel. It says in Exodus, "I have filled him with godly spirit, with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge." And it is also written regarding creation, Hashem found the earth with wisdom. He established the heavens with understanding. Chachamim point out that the wisdom that he gave him was understanding how to use the letters themselves. So each item in the Mishkan isn't just a random item. The Mizbeach, the altar, the curtains, the rings, the basins are not just arbitrary, random things. Each one has to be created in some level of perfection. And this is why the Torah goes into great detail by giving us the measurements and full measurements and half measurements. So for example, like the Aron, the Ark, was 1.5 amot by 2.5 amot. It's the only one of the items in the Holy of Holies that is measured in half amot. Everything else is a full amah, full measure. So they ask, why is the Ark of the Covenant in half measures? And they say because it teaches you humility. Right, you can't approach Torah, the Ark of the Covenant, the Aron represents the container for wisdom, the container for our interaction with God, and the only way to approach God and Torah itself is through this humility, the half measure. It is also interesting that there's 3 layers to it. There's an outer layer of gold, an inner layer of wood, and an outer layer and an inner layer of gold. So it's the gold is covering wood. So the often misunderstanding is that, well, you just want to do wood filler because we were just cheap on gold. And the truth is we could have made the whole thing out of solid gold. And we didn't want that. We specifically wanted something at the core that's alive. Because gold is not living, but wood is. And therefore, when you think about the Torah itself, we call it a living Torah. And therefore, the Ark itself has to be an expression of that. And therefore, Bezalel isn't just creating objects. He's hearing what God says to him as far as creating the prophetic idea of how to build something, and then taking that information and ripping out the letters, the essence of it, and creating those vessels that God wanted us to create in the temple for the temple itself. Tanya says as follows. He says, the letters with which the heavens were created to withdraw from even an instant. If those letters were to withdraw, God forbid, and return to their source, the entire heaven would revert to absolute nothingness. And this is the idea, the next verse, or the next source. In Perkei Avot, it's about God created the world with 10 utterances. Some Mefarshim say it was a song that God is singing. Now, when God does something, it's forever. And therefore, in order for creation to exist the way you and I experience it, it's because God is speaking those words right now. Now, can you hear it? The answer is not necessarily. Right? Some of you maybe at some times can, maybe some other times you cannot. But the truth is that if we're alive today and the world, the universe is in existence, it's because God is singing the song of creation. Now, God operates outside of time, which is complicated for us to understand. But in the world of infinite time, every word is infinite. You understand that? When God said, Bereshit, when he said, Ve'i or, these things are forever, the eternal, until he says, stop, right? That's why we learned the word Shakai, right? God's name is Shamar Dai. Shakai is a short form for the concept that God said enough. And had God not said enough, we'd be lost to the vast infiniteness of space. Okay? So the Maharal says, the term mamarot, he says, is used in the phrase, the world was created with 10 utterances. It differs from the seemingly synonymous word dibur. Why does it say that God created the world with mamarot and not dibrot? We said aser to dibrot, right? Why does he use the word mamar? That's what the Maharal's bothered with. He says the word dibur refers to external, audible expressions of speech, whereas mamar emphasizes the inner intention, divine will, purpose, and spiritual motive behind the words themselves. So, two things. When we talk about the 10 Commandments, they're not the same as the Mamarot. They're a little different. Thus, when the sages teach that God created the world, Basar Mamarot, 10 utterances, they're revealing that the foundation of creation lies not in sound or language, but in divine intent embedded in each utterance. The world was not brought into being arbitrarily. It was created through the purposeful, meaningful expression, each utterance containing within it the blueprint and purpose of existence. That is how an infinite being creates reality. Maharal says that creation is not merely the emergence of form from nothing, but the embodiment of divine purpose. Each utterance is an expression of God's will, which animates and sustains the universe. A creation devoid of this intent would have no reason to exist. And you'll see this, by the way, in the first letter in the alef-beit Ba'al Shem next week. We'll see how that expresses itself over there. But we also know from Tehillim, David Melech says, "Le'olam dvarcha nitzah b'shamayim." Forever, right? Your word exists. It's inscribed in the firmaments. The Ba'al Shem Tob explains that the word that le'olam, okay, refers specifically to the divine utterance from the creation narrative. Let be or kia. Let there be firmament. It was this utterance that brought the heavens into being, and at that primordial moment. But what sustains them? Why does the firmament not decay or fade like material things normally do? Bread going stale, roads crumbling, bodies aging. The answer, according to Ba'al Shem Tob, lies in the continuous presence of God's word. The heavens endure because God is permanently saying, let there be a firmament. The divine speech that God created in the heavens is not a one-time event, but a constant ongoing utterance. Without the continual infusion of will and speech, the heavens, and indeed all of creation, would instantly revert to their pre-creation state, absolute nothingness. Tovo. Now it's interesting, when you actually read those first few verses in Genesis, they're very dense. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim et haaretz, v'haaretz hayta tovo, v'ruach Elokim merachepet al pnei hamayim. The earth was null and void, and the Spirit of God is hovering over the water. Water is a fascinating, element in this planet. It's one of the reasons why we have life on this planet. No other planet in our solar system has water. Mayim itself. Mayim is something that is used to conceal things. It's also there to reveal things. We know that it's because God created the firmament, but it's only when he was mavdil bein mayim lamayim, when he separates the upper waters and the lower waters, do you see that the world begins to have its form. Okay? Now, all this, again, is trying to lend itself a deeper expression and understanding of speech. Speech is everything, right? We'll see that a little bit later as well, that one missing letter in the Torah invalidates the Torah, one missing letter in your mezuzah invalidates the mezuzah. In our generation, when we have computer code, right? Your phones, your computers at home are made up of all kinds of zeros and ones. One letter, one digit missing, the whole thing falls apart. You want to make a phone call, you get the wrong number, it doesn't connect, no connection, wrong connection. The same is true with the Hebrew alphabet. The Hebrew alphabet are not just letters. Each one is a divine expression of something more. Not an accident, ladies, that the AI today is built off of large language models, right? Language itself is the key to intelligence. I had my granddaughter over yesterday, and she's a parrot right now. She can repeat anything you say, right? She has some key phrases that she loves, like stop and no. And she has this no, she says it in the cutest way. Now, a child learns language first. The ooh, the ah, the sounds, letters, words, sentences, ideas. It's intelligence, right? Hopefully our intelligence, right, is an expression of all the work we put in the years before to get to a point where we can communicate. That's what makes us human. Our ability to speak, to comprehend, based off of speech, right? In the same way that you and I were created with this power of speech, okay? God creates the world the same way. Look at the next source, number 8, right? He says over there, Dover, the Magid, the Mezrich. He says, it is known that in Kabbalistic literature that the letter of the alef-beit were the first things created. After the letters were brought into existence, the Holy One, blessed be He, used them as building blocks to create all the worlds. This is the hidden meaning of the Torah's opening in Bereshit, Bara Elokim et Hashemayim, right? That is, God first created letters with which He would subsequently form heaven and earth. So we say that Histakal be'oraita ubara alma. When the Zohar says that God looked into the Torah and created the world, that's true. But before He did that even, He first had to create the letters themselves. God does not need letters to communicate. He gave over a perfect system. He was the best calligrapher, and he had the coolest font ideas, because each font in the Hebrew letter tells you a story, something more. Okay? Sefer Yessirah says as follows: the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet are not merely symbols for communication. They're profound primal spiritual forces, the raw material through which God shaped reality. When God combined these letters into words, phrases, and commandments, creation itself was brought into being. His will translated into tangible existence. This is the central teaching of Sefer Yessirah. By the way, the Sefer Yessirah is all letters, all vowels, okay, and whatever Masar we have on how to understand those ideas. One of the earliest Kabbalistic texts traditionally ascribed to Avraham Avinu, the work describes how these sacred letters served as instruments of creation, much like elements in chemistry, through a rearrangement, permutation, substitution, guided by specific mystical systems. Each new configuration generates a unique spiritual output. Just as different combinations, hydrogen and oxygen, can yield either water, H2O, or hydrogen, H2O2, so too the sacred letters produce vastly different spiritual realities, depending on their arrangement. Each combination reveals a new blend of cosmic energy encoded in the structure of language itself. Divine spiritual science shows us that speech is not just expression, it is creation itself. So for example, the word for dog in Hebrew is kelev. And I'll print out next week a list of all the letters and their numbers and so on, their values and so on and so forth. The word kelev is the number 52. How do I know that? Well, with a chaf, lamed, bet is 20, 30, and 2. Each letter has a numerical value, like the Roman numerals. 52, what is 52? 52 just sounds like an arbitrary number, but it's not. The word 52, you find correlated to the word behema. Bet, he, mem, he is also 52. And therefore, now that I find that the word dog and animal have a correlation, there is something there between a relation between these two ideas. Maybe that dogs fall into the animal class, unclear how it unpacks. That's where Misorah is so important. There's so much information in the universe. it's very hard to know how to direct and understand it. This is why we rely on our tradition from our rabbis. We rely on the tradition that we have in our scriptures and so on and so forth. This helps us understand these things. And there's very little that is written on the specifics. They'll give you general ideas. And your job is to take these general principles and see how to apply it in the world itself. So for example, the Zohar says in Sefer Yessirah, God utterance, he said, let there be a firmament. Right? More than the creating of the physical sky, according to the sages of Kabbalistic tradition, the utterance brought into existence even seven distinct heavens, each one spiritual realm with unique roles, functions, and celestial beings. Each of these realms is not merely a conceptual layer of reality, but spiritual, vibrant world, animated and formed through the combination of divine letters found in God's speech. The phrase, let there be a firmament, contains the encoded spiritual energies and instructions for these heavens to come to being and carry out their cosmic mission. The letters of these utterances, in a specific arrangement and hidden permutations, serve as conduits for divine forces, creating not just visible elements in the sky, but entire systems of spiritual reality. Realms we cannot see, but which sustain and influence existence on every level. So when it says Vayi Rakia, right, we talk about different spheres of existence. Those words themselves are not just telling me a description, a story of Genesis, but it's actually showing me the code that God used to actually express reality as we can understand it or experience it on a physical level versus or even beyond on a spiritual level. This is where God brings Adam. He wants to see what he's going to call the animals. It says, that Adam called each living creature, that would be its name. He gave each object its name. Not just random arbitrary sounds, but he looked at their essence, what animated them, and that's why he gave them the names. For example, go back to the Kelev. Kelev, right? The Maharal points out, he says it's Kelev. It's like it has a heart. It's like it's your friend, but it's not. Don't get too lost into thinking that dog is your man's best friend. There is something that is there, but it's Kelev. It's like it has a heart, but it's just still a behemoth. It's still an animal. Don't get lost into loving your animals too much. Okay? We see this today, by the way, where this is the first year in the United States where we see the population has decreased in the United States, where we see less people have children now more than ever since we've taken, the census in America. And what we found, which is so fascinating, no one speaks about this, that instead you see an explosion of ownership in dogs and cats. What's that? You see how people today are looking for some kind of connection and they feel like they're being fulfilled by the kilev. There's something that is there, but it's false, it's fake, it's fictitious. I'm not saying you can't have some kind of connection to something there, obviously, but that's not the ideal relationship we want to build. God says to the angels, let us make man. What does it mean that God created us in his image? Does God have an image? And the answer is no, God has no image. Now it's interesting where it says, Vayomer Elokim Na'aseh Adam. We know there's different names for God. What does the word Elokim mean? How would you translate that word? Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam shehakol nihya b'dvaro. Amen. What does the word Elokim mean? So, what's that? Yes, we know that the word Elokim comes from the God's justice, right, judgment. But Elokim also comes from the words Ba'al hakochot kulam, the power of all things. And therefore, when it says, the Torah says that we are created in God's image of Elokim, it means in the same way that God can create, man can create. How do we create? We create by actions and words. Okay, this is why Lashon Hara is so powerful. We know that during this time period, we know the students of Rabbi Kiva died. 24,000 students all died. Lack of respect, lack of proper action to one another, lack of proper speech to one another. Sinat chinam, right? We fix the world through doing positive action and using positive speech. How do we do that? We pray. We say Baruch Hashem, right? I had a teacher who told me never to say B'li ayin hara. He says, you say B'li Ein Hara, you're giving power to Ein Hara. Instead, say Baruch Hashem. Say the positive. Everything should be positive. Because your speech creates reality. So, Chaim of Volozhin, in his Nefesh HaChaim, seminal work, says that when Titus HaRasha, Titus, the evil general that came to destroy the second temple, he said when he came to destroy the walls of the second temple was already destroyed. He destroyed nothing. What does he mean? He says that, can you ground flour that was already grounded? He says, no, you're doing nothing. You can't make it anymore. It's grounded already. It's fine. He says that when Titus came down to destroy the temple, the spiritual walls that animate and give physical expression to the world that we live down here, they were destroyed first. You understand that? So what he's saying is like this: this table, okay, has a spiritual energy in a spiritual plane that comes down and animates this table and gives this table form. And the only way this table can be destroyed is if we are somehow able to sever the spiritual connection from above to the physical item below. And therefore, when Titus came down to destroy the temple, the only reason why those walls came tumbling down is because our thoughts and actions were so negative that we destroyed the temple above. And when the temple above is destroyed, you got no foundation down here, so it's going to fall. Everything's going to fall apart down here, right? You are an interesting creation because you're created in the image of God. By the way, angels can't destroy things. Goyim can't destroy things in the same way that we can. I believe this is where anti-Semitism comes from. Anti-Semitism comes from a world where Jews, our actions, impact the world on a spiritual plane. And when we have negative behavior, that brings down negative energy. So naturally, or maybe intuitively, non-Jews are aware of this. And there's a little bit of resentment that we're not upholding our part of the bargain of building and creating a more beautiful, profound world. The world is still in exile. The Shekhinah is not here, and that's because of me and you. But if we were individuals that were truly thinking deeply about how I can fix this, how I can repair this broken world, and understanding that the way I can do that is by repairing myself, because I am the conduit to a spiritual plane. And when my actions and my thoughts and my words are in sync with God's wants, then I'm fixing reality. And in that space of my ability to fix reality in the world itself, I bring a certain calmness, a newness to my non-Jewish brothers and sisters. And when I don't do that, there's just anti-Semitism. I've been on X, now Twitter, formerly known as Twitter. The amount of anti-Semitism I see daily is unreal. I've never seen anything like it before. I mean, the amount of conspiracy theories, the amount of hate, the amount of just disgusting ideas that I thought were buried a long time ago are being revisited today. It's terrifying. And it comes from, by the way, most of it is being fueled by whom? By Jews. Right? Oh, Jews feel like it's okay to say things like, maybe 6 million Jews didn't die. Who says it was actually 6 million? Maybe it was only 5 million. And once you question the number itself, maybe you question everything. Maybe Hitler was right. Maybe the Germans were onto something. Maybe Jews do control everything. Every single conspiracy theory is becoming true again. Because we live in a world where we distrust everything from before. There's no foundational ideas, no things there anymore that we can trust anymore, and therefore we have to assume that everything we know is a lie. Questioning Churchill was really the bad guy. He was a warmonger. That's what people are saying today. It's crazy. What's that?
They always said that about him.
He said that about him, but without him, you and I would not be having this conversation today. Anyway, everything is about foundations, going back to truths, right? You can't have a conversation about things if we can't define things. So for example, when we say the word ish and isha, we know we're talking about men and women. What's a woman? Unclear today, right? Define it. How do you explain what that is today, right? Anyone can give birth today. A man can give birth today also. It's no longer a defining feature for women. It's nonsense, obviously. Right? But when you live in a reality where we're trying to redefine things, we're trying to get rid of old ideas, old definitions, it's only because of some other nefarious purpose. God created us in His image, b'tzalmenu, because you and I have the power of impacting creation. And you see this, by the way, and I didn't put in here because we could spend a whole entire class just doing this. When the Dor HaFlaga, the generation of the Tower of Babel, got together, it says something interesting. Pasuk says, and they all spoke one language. Right? Who cares that they spoke one language? What difference does it make? Right? What they spoke. Like, we never hear about what people in Noah's generation spoke. What's that?
It could be an individual, that was the whole thing. It was the majority that took over the minority.
Okay, you could say that, but we know that the word Babel comes from the fact that at the end of the story, God changed their language. The question is why? It doesn't tell us that the generation of Noah spoke one language, even though they all did. Why does it tell me that the generation of the Tower of Babel spoke one language? I don't need to know that. You can tell me at the end that we changed all the languages. We confused them. Bil Babel, we babble. The whole concept of not being able to understand came as a result of after. But why start the story by telling me that they spoke one language? And the Chachamim point out over there that they spoke one language because they understood the language that animates creation. And their interest in building this tower wasn't just about creating a fortress to fight God. It was about creating a space that was devoid of God, only created by man. And therefore they baked their own bricks, right? Because they didn't want anything from God. They wanted their own reality that they could control. And therefore what they were doing there, according to the Kabbalists, they were taking the names of the angels, because if you know the name of an angel, you can summon it, which is why we don't say the names of angels, unless they're written in the Torah itself. Like we could say Raphael, Michael, Gabriel. But other names we don't say, because when you call the name, it comes, you summon it, okay? And therefore they were using the names of the angels and getting the angels to unbind spiritual connections between the physical world and the spiritual world. They want to take the keys of reality and control reality. And that's why they create their own space, their own tower, their own world, their own mini mall, their own mini society, where they could be completely outside of God's reality, God's realm. That's the kind of fight they wanted to have with God. They weren't fighting with God with a sword. They wanted to fight God by take over the system that He used, the language that He used to create reality. They wanted to hack that system. And that's why the Torah is telling us that they spoke one language, which is why then God, what does He do? He changed the languages. They no longer have access to the root language of creation itself. If God created the world but with mamarot, and you and I created in His image, then we can undo the world with mamarot. You understand? So God, yeah. The Babel afterwards was a way of preventing mankind from abusing the system.
Is it for the angels?
What's that?
I don't know, not understanding.
Oh.
Babel was created so that man couldn't call the angels?
So man cannot use the Hebrew language to hack the system, hack reality, right? If the language itself is code, right, and I can use the code to change how things operate, I'll use it to benefit me. So God says, no more, you guys no longer have access to it. And you'll see, by the way, which is fascinating, next week I'll show you a chart about how all language is very much rooted in Hebrew, like alpha, beta, gamma, delta, alphabet, gimel, daled, right, are very much an expression of the Hebrew language. Even ancient script has its origins in Hebrew itself. The fonts themselves came a little bit later, and we'll explain that later, but it's fascinating stuff.
Maybe the word like you're just babbling.
Say that.
From the Babel.
That's where it comes from, the babble, that means, because everything we're saying right now is just babble. The words that I use right now do not express any kind of truth, meaning it's not an expression of reality. When I say the word cup, I just use that sound, the cup sound, and associate it with this. It doesn't tell me anything about the object. When I use the word kos, I'm not just saying something arbitrary. The word kos somehow defines what this object is. And not only that, the word itself makes it a kos. The word shulchan, table, is not just arbitrary sounds. It defines what the table is. Yeah.
So by using the Hebrew word, it connects the spiritual to the physical. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
The Egyptians too tried to use magic in that way.
Well, we know that. I said this last time. You said that we know that that there's the Egyptian culture believed that that it was all about vibrations and resonance, and they often use they say that the way that the ancient Egyptians moved massive stones was through songs, and that it was through vibration, that they were able to sing in the key of the object itself and then get it to move. What does that even mean? How do you know what the key of the object is? That's why there's this idea of resonance and vibration is being studied right now very thoroughly. This is like a big deal, right? This is an emerging field in science right now. So it's like still very on the cutting edge. We don't know enough about it, and we don't know exactly how it fits into Hebrew, but there is definitely, we know that each Hebrew word has vowels. There's a special cantillation, there's a song to each word in the Torah, and it wants to be sung in a very particular kind of way. Why that way? Why with that pitch? Why with that sound? I don't know. But there's something there that's more. This is what we're saying. We're saying there's something more to the Hebrew language than just sound. That we're saying now that the letters themselves are a vibrational truth, okay? And somehow the words themselves express a truth about a reality that you and I don't fully see, because even though I know this table is vibrating, I don't see it. I know the walls around me are vibrating, I don't see anything. I hope they're not. I don't see anything vibrating around me. Everything looks pretty solid. So God creates a world where he fills it with his light from the external and the internal. And what's animating all of it is speech. That's what we're saying. That speech itself is what animates life itself. Okay?
And that's why these walls are full of Torah.
That's why we try to make them full of Torah. But even life conception itself, by the way, right? When two people come together to make a child, that is all being activated through thought. The Kabbalists will actually say that when a husband and wife are together and they want to make a baby, their thoughts impact the kind of child that they have. And therefore the thinking that goes into making the child has a deep, it's all, the thoughts are made up of words, right? You want a boy or a girl, that happens then. You want to be intelligent, beautiful, whatever, it has to do with your thinking. Otherwise it just becomes random, right? But your thinking is what's able to go ahead and impact conception itself. Okay, that's Kabbalistic thought. Medrash Breshit Rabbah says that Adam was of such spiritual stature, the angels mistook him for a divine being and sought to praise him with a heavenly chant, Kadosh, 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 right? The Talmud Chagiga describes him as one who spanned the entire universe from one end of the earth to the other. So he's massive. He's not just some guy like me and you. Adam was this massive spiritual giant who saw reality way differently than you and I did.
So Adam said that, not just angels say that to God, it was Adam?
No. Angels were saying it about Adam.
They were saying that.
Yeah. No. He wasn't saying it. The angels saying that they thought that he was God because he was so special, so great. Ba'al Shem Tob says, this towering soul was not merely a physical marvel. He was entrusted by God with the mission of profound spiritual insight, like naming of creation. When Adam named the bull Shor and the eagle Nesher, he was not arbitrarily assigning labels. Rather, he was perceiving and articulating the inner spiritual forces that animate each creature. According to Kabbalistic tradition, each Hebrew letter contains unique spiritual energy. By combining letters with specific names, Adam was identifying the soul patterns, energetic blueprint that God used to form each being. As the Torah states, whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. Sages explain that this verse implies permanence. The name meaning, the name Adam gave reflects the eternal essence of that creature. The name he assigned was not just descriptive, it was formative, containing divine energies that express themselves in sinews, nerve, muscle, shape, strength, and function. Just the Ba'al Shem Tob taught earlier, the divine utterance, let there be light, let there be a firmament, continues to stay in the heavens, so too the names given by Adam continue to channel the spiritual forces that define the nature of every being. Meaning, God created man to define things, how he sees it, and that definition is what animates the things that we see around today. There's actually one source, the Midrashim say that when Adam came to the world, it was empty. There was no grass, no vegetation. If there's no grass, no vegetation, there's no animals. It's only when he started praying for rain that the rain brought forward the vegetation, the animals, and everything else came into existence as a result of him praying. Again, using speech as a way of activating reality. There's a study that was done at Columbia University in 2002 where they took 60 patients that were sick, and 30 were assigned different people to pray for them, and 30 they did nothing with. Okay? The 30 people that were prayed for got healed faster by 30%, 35%. Yeah. They did not know they were being prayed for. No one knew. Same group of people, same things, somehow it changes. Okay, it impacts. Words matter. The Rabbi Moshe Cordovero says as follows. He says, many assume that the Hebrew letters are no different than any other language symbols. Agreed upon science that represent sounds. For example, the letters formed by the lips, such as b, m, p, bet, mem, peh, were simply chosen to correspond to those sounds. If this were true, the letters alef-beit would be no different than any of the other alphabet of any other nation. Such a view is impossible absurdity. The words of the Torah themselves restore the soul, Tehillim says. Even the repetition of seemingly mundane place names like Atarot and Divon, which are the names of different cities mentioned in the Torah, hold deep spiritual significance. That we are commanded to read every Torah portion twice in Hebrew and once in translation, no matter how plain the verse may seem, is proof of Torah's inner perfection, hidden mysteries, divine reality, and spiritual depth. There's a mitzvah of doing Shnayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum. We have to read the Torah, each verse twice, and its translation, understanding it. And therefore, that's not an accident. There's something about when we read the Torah itself that spiritually energizes the physical world itself. The Torah teaches us that if there are no Jews learning Torah anywhere in the world will cease to exist. And that's why there's time zones. There's time zones around the world so that no matter where you are on the planet, someone is saying something in Torah. And that animates the reality. Rambam says that the 8th principle concerns the Torah being from heaven. Torah min hashamayim. This means that we believe that the entire Torah that we possess today is that the Torah was given to Moses and that is entirely transmitted by God. This includes not only the broad concepts, but also every single word, even the spelling, letters, and shapes. All of its origins from the divine. There's no difference between the likes of the verses and the sons of Ham were Cush and Mitzrayim, or Timnah was a concubine. And the verses like, I am Hashem, your God. All are equally from the mouth of the Almighty. All Torah Hashem, Temimah, all perfect Torah of God, pure, holy, and true. This is why, by the way, Maimonides believe that, for example, when there are some communities that have the custom of standing during the recitation of the Yessirah Dibrot, or during, we just had on Pesach, some people stand up during Kriyat Yam Suf, right, Shirat Yam. So Rambam says you're not allowed to. Why? Because we don't want to show that any part of the Torah is greater than any other part. It's all equal. It's all the same, okay? So some people will give the aliyah to the rabbi, so that everyone stands for the rabbi and not for the aliyah itself. This way they're doing both at the same time. Okay, Chida says in Shem Agdolim, he says, many wonder if God knows our innermost thoughts. Why do we have to articulate prayer at all? If God knows everything, why do I have to say anything? Wouldn't it be even greater sanctification of his name if he fulfilled the silent desire of the heart without having to express it at all? He says the letters used in prayers are not merely symbolic. When articulated in specific formulations established by the spiritual giants who compose the liturgy, these letter combinations activate profound spiritual forces. Through them, new spiritual light, orot, chadoshim, are drawn down to the world. Verbalizing the prayers is essential. Speech activates the letters, and these letters then arouse their spiritual roots above. When prayer is expressed aloud, it initiates a unique and unprecedented spiritual interaction. The sacred letters in that moment combine with the exact spiritual and physical conditions of the world at the time when prayer is uttered. In this way, human beings become partners in creation, combine sacred letters to elicit divine influences and spiritual transformation. This is why it's so important for us to, it's actually a machloket about the silent prayers in the Midah. Why say anything? Just use your thought. And the answer is no, you have to be moving your lips. Even though nothing is coming out of your mouth, the idea that you articulating it without any kind of sound itself is what we want in the silent Midah. because it's only through the articulation of it, even with the sound, that you're activating it. Zohar says,
You have to hear your prayers.
yes, but not during the sound Amidah, right? There's one opinion that says that you should say it quiet enough that only you can hear it. And there's another opinion that says you should say it to where it's inaudible, not even to yourself.
I heard that you have to research.
Yeah, it's machloket. I'm saying it's machloket. So according to the Arizal, he says it should not be audible at all. But the reason why,
It's disturbing to others.
no, even if it's not disturbing to others, he's saying ideally it should be a movement of the lips without any sound. And he says that people who need the sound are doing it because they need it for concentration. But ideally, he says, you should not make any sound.
So I heard the opposite, like in order for it to come into being, you do feelings.
Just tell you what the Arizal is saying. I'm saying because I think that here, during the sound of media, you're trying to transcend the rest of the davening to a place where no words. Even though, remember that, we'll touch upon this itself, each letter, the Torah was written on white fire on black, white fire on black fire. Ever hear that idea?
Yes.
That the letters represent the black fire and the empty spaces represent the white fire. So there's a whole entire Kabbalah of understanding or being able to read the spaces around the letters. You're just looking, your eye is just focused on the letter itself, Bereshit, right? But what about all the space, the white fire in between the letters, right? There's a whole other layer of meaning that's there as well. And it's not spoken. It's an unspoken truth that's being presented that cannot be articulated. And it's of a higher quality. You know, there's a great analogy of two rabbis who were writing letters to one another. It was a famous Hasidic tale. And this messenger takes the letter from one rabbi to the other and he delivers it, and the rabbi reads it, is so excited, he smiles and sends it back. The other rabbi receives it and he's, wow, this is an amazing letter, and he sends it back. And this has been going on for months. They're writing each other letters, and the messenger was told that he's not allowed to read the letters. So months are going by, he's just curious already. It's been like 4 months, no one telling him what's going on. And he's like, I want to see what's going on. He opens the letter and he sees the letter is blank. He's like, what is this? It's a joke. He brings him the letter and the rabbi's like, oh wow, I can't believe this. I would send him back to him. And then the rabbi sends him back a letter. And now he's curious, he opens up, he sees the letter that he's sending back is also blank. It's like, this is a cool trick they're playing on me. I've been bringing back, nothing here. Why are they doing this to me? So he finally has the courage to tell the rabbi, tell me what's going on. Like, I read your letter, it's blank. He says, you don't understand. He said, we've been having this deep correspondence. There was no response. That empty letter was a response to all the letters from before, that I have no response for you. There's no love, there's no way I can't articulate this. And the rabbi sent back an empty letter saying the same thing. There's just no words back and forth, we're stuck. Impasse. Sometimes saying nothing, action itself, is more profound, right? Therefore, the letters in between the spaces where nothing is being said is a truth that it can be higher, even greater. Because sometimes words lose themselves. Words can't express emotion in its entirety. And when we try to articulate those words themselves, we lessen that experience. Sometimes there's no words. Like, for example, when Aaron found out about his sons dying, it says, "V'yidom Aaron." He just said, remain silent. There's nothing for him to say. But silence itself is also telling. This is why Chachamim say shtika kahoda'ah. Silence is a form of admission. Sometimes saying nothing is also a problem. Sometimes you have to say something. But sometimes silence is actually a profound way of expressing another kind of truth. Okay, so where were we? Number 17. The creation of light, like all acts of divine speech, was not merely a verbal declaration. It was an unveiling of divine will through medium of letters. The phrase "le'or," right? It represents not only God's desire for light to exist, but also the actual flow of spiritual energy and brought into the being. It's interesting, by the way, that the letters themselves are always on a black font. Right? We don't read now with your screens. You can invert it, where the page is black and the letters are white. But the black represents the concealment of light. But that concealment is also an expression of a truth, because we're trying to use the letters to get back to that white space, that ultimate level of truth. And every creative utterance corresponds to a specific divine attribute. Sphira. When God willed there to be light, His will was expressed through the Sefirah, most appropriate to light, Chesed or Tiferet, and was then channeled through the Hebrew letters of the utterance of Or. And you'll see why, by the way, Or is light when we get to Aleph. The utterance itself is not just a statement of the act of creation. The letters of the phrase, let there be light, serve as spiritual vessels, transmitting divine energy into the world and giving form to the reality of light. The statement, let there be light, is therefore not descriptive, it is performative. It is the creation. The light exists because that specific arrangement of letters revealed and enacted the Creator's will. God creates, He speaks, and He creates at the same time. Moshe Cordovero in Sefer Pardes says, many have assumed that the letters were conventions. That is, did we do this already?
No.
That they form the letters of the lips of Bet Mem Peh should represent by those written forms. I think we did. Yeah, I did this already. This is a mistake. 18 is a mistake. Skip it. Torah Hashem T'mimah Meshivat Nefesh Ha'edut. Number 19. Right? God's words are truth, and there is no room for anything that is. If God's words are truth, then how could the sounds, the letters themselves, be arbitrary? And this is what Rosh Cordovero says. He says the very fact that we are required to repeat each weekly Torah portion, we did this already as well. Torah Dibon, we did this is all skipping, this is all a mistake. This could have been a lot shorter, I apologize. Rabbah said, number 22, if the righteous wanted to, they could create a universe. As it is written, but your sins separate between you and your God, in Isaiah. This suggests that were it not for human sin, there would be no barrier between the soul and the divine creative force. I've actually had a rabbi who had a neighbor in Israel that never spoke Lashon Hara. And they say that whatever this man said came true. Because if your mouth is sanctified and it's godlike, then in the same way when God makes a request, so should our requests be made and express truth and become reality. But because we don't understand proper speech, our mouths are so far removed from truth that whatever we say doesn't impact reality. But in a world where my mouth is sanctified and in sync with reality would bend to whatever I say. This is how you read about the Tanaim able to resurrect the dead. This is how you read about how people change nature. People moving things, people converting, making vinegar flammable, stopping the Jordan River. All these things are not just random, right? This is us using God's word to impact reality.
But aren't there unholy practices too?
Of course there are. So many unholy practices.
So is your mouth.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So you can create the same thing.
In a negative way. Yeah. That's why we don't give people, Ayin Hara, by the way, is not even saying the word, it's just looking and giving the guy a bad power. What happens if you actually use the words? What happens when you actually say, oh, you don't deserve this because you're that? It's worse. But even something as a thought with words impacts reality. All the more so the word spoken, right? The spoken word. Degel Machne Ephraim, number 23, says that the phrase Tzirufei Otiot often translates as a combination of letters. He's referring to here to B'Tzalel. He says it refers to the method of creative speech used by God and the righteous and mystical tradition. Each letter combination corresponds to a set of spiritual energies or forces of creation. He connects Tzirufim combinations with Tziruf HaKesef, the process of purifying silver. Just as precious metals must be refined through fire to remove their dross, so too the soul must be purified for its spiritual potential to be fully realized. This analogy teaches the process of finding one's inner life. Through Torah, prayer, ethical living, enables a person to align the divine language of creation, unlocking creative and redemptive capacities. You and I are here on this planet to become bigger, greater human beings. We refine ourselves. The only way we can refine ourselves is through from a Jewish perspective, is through Limud Torah, the study of Torah. The Torah itself is a combination of letters and words. The combination of those letters and words and Tehillim and the prayers, all that help refine and elevate our soul to something more. The Zohar says, Yesh Shishim Ribui Otiot LaTorah. There are 600,000 letters to Torah is an acronym for the word Yisrael. Yisrael is Yesh Shishim Ribo Otiot LaYisrael. This alludes to the 600,000 souls of Israel that stood at Mount Sinai to receive the Torah, paralleling the 600,000 letters of the Torah scroll. According to mystical tradition, each Jew is a spiritual linked to one's unique letter of the Torah, and through this connection derives spiritual vitality from the divine word. And there's a famous story, I forget who it was, I think it was a Vilna Gaon. He had a student who went off the derech. He said, I don't want to be Jewish anymore. He said, I don't believe you. You said that you could find every person's name in the Torah. My name's not there. Therefore, God doesn't love me. He says, no, it is here. And he showed it to him, and he cried in the teshuvah at that moment. Each of us has a spot in the Torah itself because we represent, according to this idea, a circuit that completes reality. We're here with a task. You have to see yourselves as a spiritual nuclear power plant, and where your thoughts, your actions, your words impact reality. And you and I together, having this conversation, those people are going to listen to this later, impacts reality on a different level. There's a personal level, and then there's a communal level that does together. Because we're here thinking about this idea, we bring this kind of energy into the world again. And therefore, it's up to you and I to hopefully try to spend some time thinking more deeply about, well, how am I elevating my speech? If words are so profound, what am I doing to purify my speech? What am I doing to elevate the words? Am I choosing words that heal? Words that unite? Am I choosing words that bring people together, or am I using it, God forbid, to do the opposite? Sometimes we see things in a negative way, and we start articulating things that are negative. Like my Pesach program, I just thought it was complicated. There was people very upset about the way the program was unfolding, and I said to them, listen, you can't control it, just relax, it'll be okay. They couldn't control themselves, the fighting, you can't control your environment, you can't control the circumstance you're in, but you can't control your response. And your response is always tethered to your thoughts and words and actions, okay? We want to be those people that are elevated to something more higher. Rabbi Gedalia Shor says as follows, he says in a Torah scroll, if even one letter is missing, the entire scroll is rendered invalid. And if two letters touch, it is likewise invalid. Meaning if the font itself is unclear, it does not stand on its own, you break the circuit, right? You ever see a circuit? You ever see a circuit board? Those little metal feeling, if one item is not connected, the whole thing falls apart. Same is true with the Torah. This teaches us that every Jew, like every letter, is essential to the nation's spiritual completeness. The Jewish people cannot receive the Torah until they were united. It's when they came together in that way that they were able to go ahead and bring the world to a higher state of consciousness where they could receive the Torah. Yet even in unity, each individual has a distinct role, just as each Torah letter must remain separate and unique. Through this, we learn the Torah is not only a text, it is a living portrait of the Jewish people, where every soul is a sacred letter, irreplaceable and radiant with divine purpose. God willing, we'll try to unpack what those letters are and how we could use them to make the world around us a better, greater place. Looking forward to the conversation. Bezrat Hashem, we'll start with the letter Aleph next week. Have a great week, everybody.